You were not born to hate yourself. No child enters the world carrying guilt or doubting their own worth. The feeling of "I'm not good enough" or "I am," the problem was never part of your blood. It was poured into you, drop by drop, through disappointed glances, through dismissive words, and worst of all, through the silence that was never explained. You were not born with shame. It was planted in you like an invisible poison, subtle, slow, but devastating to the core of who you are. Even now, you might still be living a life that isn't yours. A life built on a lie that you need to change, fix, or hide the most honest parts of yourself to be accepted. But here's the truth. You are not the problem. The world is. The world was wrong for making you believe otherwise. In today's video, we step into a confrontation, not to complain, not to seek short-term comfort, but to expose the root of the shame that's haunted you for years, to rip off the mask society has forced you to wear, and most importantly, to help you find your way back to yourself. If you're tired of pretending to be someone you're not, if you're ready to face the truth, then this video is your wake-up call. Don't forget to click like and subscribe if these words touched something deep within you, because this journey is just beginning. Have you ever wondered why certain emotions run so deep that you no longer realize they're just emotions? Shame is no longer something you feel briefly when you make a mistake. It becomes a second skin, something you carry when you wake up, when you step outside, when you look in the mirror, and even when you sit alone in your room in silence. To Friedrich Nietzsche, this was not a coincidence. Nietzsche wasn't just a philosopher. He was a man who exposed the subtle illusions society draped over humanity, and one of the most powerful tools of that system, according to him, was shame. Nietzsche called it a moral invention, not in a noble sense, but a kind of morality constructed to tame the raw instincts of man. It wasn't born out of enlightenment, but out of fear. Fear that human nature is too strong, too vibrant, too wild. Religion, institutions, and traditional ethics shaped shame into a tool of control. It made you bow your head. It made you doubt yourself. It turned your yes to life into a hesitant whisper instead of a bold affirmation. They didn't need chains. They just needed to plant a single thought: I am the problem. From there, you withdraw. You adjust. You slowly self-destruct in a quiet, orderly fashion. Nietzsche refused to accept that. He didn't want you to live a proper life. He wanted you to be reborn as a free spirit, one who dares to live by instinct, dares to create new values, dares to break the moral cages that have trapped generations before you. He wrote, "You must have chaos within you to give birth to a dancing star." Not because he glorified rebellion, but because he understood this. What we call normal can sometimes be the most elegant form of imprisonment. To Nietzsche, shame wasn't just a negative feeling. It was a structure of power, a system designed to pull you away from your true self. It turned desire into guilt, instinct into taboo, and your true self into something to be hidden. And the danger is, you don't even realize you're being manipulated. You believe that feeling ashamed is a sign of morality. You repress yourself. You edit yourself. You shrink yourself just enough to be acceptable to the world around you. But acceptable to whom? And for what purpose? Nietzsche would ask you that. Don't confuse humility with self-rejection. Don't mistake numbness for peace. And don't believe that abandoning yourself is the path to love or real acceptance. You don't have to apologize for existing. Your existence, with all its light and shadow, deserves to be affirmed, not hidden. Nietzsche taught us that freedom is not doing whatever you want. It's having the courage to live as who you truly are, even when that truth makes others uncomfortable. So the real question is not, how do I become better? But rather, Who taught me that I was never good enough to begin with? And why do I still believe it? If something within you is quietly resonating right now, if there's a small voice inside saying, "Finally, someone has put into words what I could never say," then don't ignore it. Don't overlook the moment when something touches your soul. Click the like button to help amplify this message. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next part, where we'll dive into the false self, the mask you created to survive. But that ended up separating you from who you truly are. Because the journey back to your essence is not a leap, it's an unmasking, layer by layer. And you don't have to walk it alone. Nietzsche gave us a philosophical warning, but John Bradshaw took the scalpel to the human psyche. He didn't just speak about systems, he pointed directly to the pain we carry as individuals. If Nietzsche exposed the societal cage, then Bradshaw walked straight into the locked room inside your soul, where your inner child trembles, and said, "I see you." Bradshaw didn't use abstract philosophy. He named the pain with words that are simple, yet undeniable. Toxic shame, not just a passing emotion, but a way of living, a second skin that clings to the mind, a lens through which you view yourself, always sensing that something is fundamentally wrong. You don't just feel shame when you do something wrong. You begin to believe that you are the mistake. And when that belief takes root in childhood, it doesn't just affect how you feel, it tears apart your entire sense of identity. You stop being yourself in order to survive. You start living like a side character in the movie called My Life. Bradshaw described this process as a silent murder. No blood, no screaming, just a child standing still, in the middle of cold stares, harsh criticisms, and the hollow absence of love. And that child begins to think, if they can't see me, maybe I'm invisible. If they leave me, maybe I deserve to be left behind. That's the moment your true self begins to shrink, retreating into the basement of your soul. And in its place, a false self is born. False self, a hollow copy, created solely for survival. It knows when to smile, when to stay silent, what to do to avoid rejection. It becomes a psychological chameleon, always adapting, always performing, so that it is never abandoned. But what's the cost? A complete disconnection from your true nature, a life where every word, every action is calculated, an unnamed exhaustion from wearing a mask from sunrise to sundown, and when the night falls, you no longer know what your real face looks like. Bradshaw called this soul murder, a shocking term, but he used it because nothing softer could describe the gravity of what's happening inside you. This destruction doesn't come all at once. It happens slowly, over years, until you become a functional person, but one without a soul. You still work, you still smile, you still play your roles, but you're no longer living, you're merely operating. And here's the part that shakes people awake. You cannot break free from the false self with positive goals or motivational quotes from social media, because the false self wasn't born out of laziness or negativity. It was born from pain, from absence, from the fear of being hurt. You built it like a fortress, not to impress, but to survive. So healing can't start with advice. It must begin with truth. And the truth is this: you are carrying a wounded child inside, a small soul that once cried in silence and learned to stop asking, just to be allowed to exist. And you're still living by that child's rules, enduring, suppressing, trying desperately to be accepted, even if it means abandoning who you really are. Bradshaw didn't say this to dramatize your pain. He said it to hand you a map out. And the first thing he pointed to is this: you are not broken. You're simply living by an old script, written by fear and unhealed wounds. If something in you stirred while hearing this, If you recognize a small child inside, banging on the door, then pause it, take a breath, and remember, you are not crazy. You are not weak. You are simply someone who has lived too long in silence, and now it's time to speak. Click like if this message touched something hidden deep within you, and don't forget to subscribe. As we continue this journey, the journey of removing the mask and rebuilding the real you, because in the next part, we'll go into the basement of your psyche, where the false self is rooted deepest, and where the real battle begins, not against others, but to rescue yourself. Have you ever smiled while screaming on the inside? Have you ever said, "I'm fine," just to avoid making others uncomfortable, just to keep the peace, just so you wouldn't become a burden? If you have, you are not alone. You're living with a false self, an identity created not to live, but to avoid being hurt. According to John Bradshaw, that's not just politeness. It's a survival strategy. A strategy that forms when your inner child learns something very early, that your real emotions are dangerous. Dangerous because they get mocked. Dangerous because they make people angry. Dangerous because they aren't appropriate. So the child learns to hide. Hide the sadness. Hide the anger. Even hide the joy when it becomes too much. It creates a safe replica, well-behaved, obedient, likable, never a problem. A self that learns when to smile, when to nod, and when to stay silent, even when the heart is breaking. Over time, you forget you're even wearing a mask. Worse, you start believing the mask is you. You become the cheerful one, the easygoing one, the one who's in control. But only when no one's watching do you finally allow yourself to whisper, "I'm tired." The false self is never enough. It may help you earn admiration, but it can never make you feel truly loved. Because how could you feel loved when the version people love isn't real? The false self may succeed in society. It may earn praise and recognition, but deep inside, it is always alone. Because every single day, it has to keep performing. It must hold back the tears, hold back the intensity, hold back anything that might disappoint others. Bradshaw describes this as a life of self-censorship, where you become the warden of your own soul. Every emotion is filtered. Every behavior is calculated. Every dream is edited down to fit the box of acceptability. And it's in that box that you start dying without realizing it. Your thoughts, your feelings, your instincts all suppressed, replaced by automatic responses. You're not living, you're functioning, a survival machine wrapped in human skin. Bradshaw calls this soul murder. No one is killing you. You are draining life from yourself, day by day, decision by decision. And the paradox is this: you think you're doing the right thing. You think, "I'm being mature, I'm staying in control." But in truth, you are hiding who you really are. You're not living to express. You're living to avoid rejection. You may have thought, "If I stay quiet, I'll be safe. If I never disappoint anyone, they won't leave me. If I'm good enough, eventually, I'll be loved." But Bradshaw warns, you will never feel loved if you have to kill yourself inside, to be accepted by others. Not everyone dies from knives, accidents, or illness. Some people die from the inside out, die while still smiling, die while still living well on social media, die while sitting at the dinner table, replying to work messages, or hearing someone say, "You're so strong," and they don't even realize their soul has been dead for a long time. Bradshaw called this soul murder, a death with no blood, no funeral, no photos on the wall, just a person, still moving, still trying, still doing their best to be good, but disconnected from themselves. It's when you laugh without feeling joy, when you achieve what others dream of, but feel nothing inside, when you're surrounded by people, yet lonelier than ever, because inside you, everything has been suffocated. No more spontaneity, no more curiosity, no more honest self-love. Instead, you become a purely rational being. Every emotion is analyzed, every action is measured, every desire is censored. You live like a machine, polite, efficient, purposeful, but not truly alive. And the cruel irony, no one but you sees it. Everyone praises you. You're calm, you're mature, you're resilient, but they don't know that every morning you wake up, you're not putting on clothes. You're putting on a survival mask. And you don't even remember when you began losing yourself. Maybe it was the day you were scolded for crying too loudly. The time someone said you were too sensitive. That moment when you realized being yourself isn't safe. So you learn to stay quiet, to tone it down, to only show the parts that others would accept. And little by little, you withdrew from yourself. The result, a zombie-like existence. You go to work, respond, smile at the right time, kiss the right people, but no one is really there, just a moral replica, neat, polished, well-mannered, but utterly disconnected from the soul inside. Bradshaw didn't sugarcoat the truth. He didn't comfort you with pretty words. He said, the false self doesn't disappear on its own. You have to name it. You have to face it. And most importantly, you have to remember why you created it in the first place. Because you're not bad. You're not weak. You're simply someone who's been living in defense against pain. You didn't want to be rejected. You didn't want to be left behind. You just wanted to be loved. But you traded your inner life to get that love. And now the question isn't, how can I live better? But, how can I live again? Bradshaw made it clear, healing doesn't begin with hope. It begins with courage. The courage to look into the pit of your soul, where you hid yourself long ago, where your younger self is still waiting for someone to say, you don't have to pretend anymore. And if you're still watching, if your chest feels heavy, if something deep inside your heart is trembling, then don't miss the next part. Because we're about to begin the rescue of that soul, not with motivational words, but with action, with a conscious choice to drop the mask, to drop the performance, and to meet your true self again. Click like if any of this felt like your story, and subscribe so you don't miss the next part, where we begin to peel back the layers of false programming that have kept you trapped. You deserve to live again, not just exist. On one side, Nietzsche, the rebel against every mold, the one who said, you must break the chains inside your mind. On the other side, Bradshaw, the one who walks into your soul with the gentleness of a father who understands every wound his child carries. Two men, two worlds, one philosopher, one therapist, one a rebel, the other a healer, and yet they meet right in the center of your heart, where you long to be free, but also want to be loved, where you want to tear down every wall, but also piece yourself back together. Nietzsche said, you must kill the gods within, not because he hated religion, but because he hated every toxic idea that convinced you that you were born wrong. Bradshaw didn't ask you to destroy anything. He said, before you do anything, return to the deepest layer, to the place where your inner child is hiding, to the place where all your fear began. Nietzsche came first, paving the way with the hammer of knowledge. He shattered outdated moral values. The invisible voices that kept whispering, don't be too loud. Don't ask for more. Don't show who you are. He declared, no, live. Create new values. Don't bow your head. Don't wait for approval. Become a free spirit, even if you must stand alone in the ruins. And Bradshaw, he moved more slowly. He didn't ask you to destroy. He invited you to kneel before your own soul and whisper, "You are not broken. You've simply been living a script written by someone else." Two paths, seemingly opposite, but when combined, they create the deepest roadmap to liberation. Nietzsche gives you the reason to break the prison. Bradshaw gives you the map to find your way out. Nietzsche teaches you how to rise. Bradshaw teaches you how to hold the parts of you that have collapsed. Because the truth is, you can't build a new life on the rotten bricks of shame. You have to dismantle it. You have to dig deep. You must have the courage to walk through the darkest parts of your memory. The places where you once hid yourself in fear of being abandoned. Bradshaw called it the basement of the psyche. Nietzsche called it the abyss you look into and it looks back at you. Both of them said, there is no freedom unless you face your pain. No one lives fully, while still believing they need permission to be themselves. And this is where freedom begins. Not through shallow motivation, not through hollow slogans, but by looking at yourself, both the vulnerable and the fierce, both the child that needs to be held, and the warrior who's exhausted from fighting just to be loved. You don't have to choose a side. You don't have to be either the rebel or the healer. You need both. You need the strength to break and the compassion to hold what remains. This journey is not easy. No one can walk it for you. But once you begin, you'll realize freedom is not found in being accepted by others. It's found in no longer needing their acceptance. Because you've returned to yourself, to the part of you that never truly disappeared. It was simply waiting for you to remove the armor and say, I'm here, I am me, and I am enough. If this part reached a deeper place in your heart, click like to help spread this message to more people. And don't forget to subscribe, because the next part will be the turning point, where you'll learn to break the inner gods and walk into the light as your true self. No pretending, no defenses, no shame. You don't feel shame randomly. That feeling didn't just show up on its own. It had an architect. It had an invisible hand that touched your mind from a very early age. You were taught that silence is wisdom, humility is virtue, confidence is arrogance, and desire is a sin. You were taught that you shouldn't expect too much, you shouldn't express too much, and you should never burden others with your emotions. Each of these pieces became a collection of inner gods, values you never chose, but you obeyed them as if they were sacred truths. Nietzsche called them false gods, values created not to liberate you, but to keep you locked in a cage of correctness. You may have learned that bowing your head is noble, sacrifice is love, pain is the price of being accepted, silence is kindness. But have you ever asked yourself, who taught you that? And who does it really serve? Nietzsche said, you must kill those gods, not with a real hammer, but with awareness. Because as long as they live in your mind, you'll continue living like someone who's guilty, even if you've done nothing wrong. You feel guilty for wanting more. You feel selfish for putting yourself first. You feel ashamed for stepping outside the role you were assigned. These responses aren't your nature. They come from programming, a moral system absorbed through adult instructions, through the silence of your parents, through the eyes of your community, and later, through the invisible standards of social media. Bradshaw called these toxic inner voices. They are not you, yet you've lived by them for years. Nietzsche was more direct. He said they are gods that must be destroyed because they force you to kneel before your own life. Killing gods isn't about rebellion. It's not about hatred. It's about waking up and saying, I will not live one more day by rules I never agreed to. You have the right to rewrite the rules. You have the right to redefine value. You have the right to look in the mirror and say, I don't need permission to exist. Breaking down inner idols isn't just a philosophical act. It's an act of profound liberation. Because only when you stop worshipping old values can you begin to build your own values that belong to you. And you know what? There is no God stronger than the guilt you place upon yourself. No chain heavier than the expectations you mistake for morality. Nietzsche didn't want you to rebel so you could destroy. He wanted you to create. He wanted you to become the artist of your own life. To take the ashes of the old beliefs and sculpt a completely new self. Because living is an act of art, and you are the only one allowed to hold the brush. If by now your heart is beating differently, if you feel anger, emotion, or awakening, it's not a coincidence. It's the forgotten part of you, starting to rebel to be alive again. Click like if you're ready to pick up the hammer, to smash the lies you once called ideals. And don't forget to subscribe, because the next part opens a brand new chapter where you no longer live in the shadow of the old gods, but begin building a new temple from within yourself. Imagine standing in the middle of a wasteland. Everything that once defined you has collapsed. The mask you wore has fallen off. The gods you once worshipped now lie in shattered pieces at your feet. You look around, and for the first time in your life, there's no one left to please. No one to ask permission from. No rules left to follow. All that remains is you, and a simple but haunting question. What now? This is not the end. This is the beginning. Nietzsche called it the rebirth of the free spirit. Bradshaw called it reintegration of the fragmented self. Whether you use the language of philosophy or therapy, the truth remains the same. You are standing at the edge of a chance to begin again. No longer living to avoid. No longer living to hide. Now, you live to create. You're no longer controlled by old programming. You begin to ask, what are my values? What do I believe is beautiful? How do I want to live not for others, but for myself? This is not a journey of finding your old self. It's the journey of creating the self you could have been. Had you never been taught that who you are is wrong. You're not retrieving yourself like a lost item. You're sculpting yourself, like an artist building form from ashes. And this is where many people give up. Because when no one else is giving orders, the responsibility to be yourself becomes terrifying. There's no one left to blame. No role to perform. Just you and the choice. What will you do with the emptiness? Fill it with a new mask? Or embrace the rawness of starting again from the roots? Nietzsche never stopped at destruction. He demanded that you create with intention, not to live in rebellion, but to live in affirmation. Affirmation that I don't have to be someone else to have worth. I don't have to be perfect to be loved. I don't have to apologize for being true to myself. I am who I am. Incomplete, shaky, but real. And that realness is exactly what the world needs most right now. Not more people who fit the mold, but more souls who dare to stand tall in a world that constantly bows. Bradshaw called this the rescued child. The child who no longer has to hide its tears, no longer has to mute its laughter, no longer has to shrink just to be called good. Nietzsche called it the artist spirit. The one who transforms pain into beauty, who lives as if every day is an act of creation, a declaration. And you? Where are you in that journey? Are you still kneeling in the ashes? Or have you begun to stand, with dirt on your hands but a heart that's beating again? This is not the moment to hesitate. This is the time to reclaim your life. Rewrite the rules. Rename everything. Create an inner world where the child you once were no longer has to hide to survive. And if you're still here, reading every word, don't dismiss that, because you have already started to break the old programming. Click like to declare that you are done looking back, and subscribe to the channel, because the next part will take you to the deepest threshold where you'll choose to keep living as who others expect you to be. or to rise as the voice that was never allowed to speak. You've spent your whole life adjusting yourself, toning down the parts of you that were too much, adding just enough pleasantness to fit into the box others drew for you. You believed that if you stayed quieter, prettier, stronger, more humble, everything would finally be okay. But you were wrong, because the problem was never you. The problem was a world that taught you to be ashamed of who you are. You learned how to disappear in order to be loved. You learned how to cut yourself down in order to be accepted. You learned how to endure in silence just to be called good. But now that's enough. No love is worth having if the price is your disappearance. True freedom, as Nietzsche defined it, is not about escaping barriers. It's about no longer needing permission to exist. It's when you are no longer bound to fit in. It's when you no longer need a reason to be yourself. Nietzsche called this the free spirit, a soul that refuses to kneel before false idols. That doesn't live by social inertia. That wears no mask just to survive. It is someone who knows they are not perfect, but still dares to stand upright, rough and real, and say, "This is how I choose to live." Bradshaw painted this same state with a tender image. The inner child, finally, coming home. No more hiding. No, more performing. Just being. With everything it is soft, radiant, chaotic, alive. This is no longer just a healing journey. This is an existential journey. You're no longer trying to stop the pain. You're beginning to want to live truthfully, not to please anyone, not to censor your feelings before expressing them, not to measure every step before taking it. And from the ashes of old values, you begin to build a value system of your own, no longer asking, "What must I do to be accepted?" but instead asking, "Who do I want to become? What do I want to create? How do I want the world to feel me when I'm no longer hiding?" The free spirit doesn't need perfection. It only needs radical honesty with itself. It chooses to affirm life even in the chaos. It chooses to hold itself even when trembling. And most importantly, it chooses not to abandon its essence even if it must stand alone. This is the highest form of freedom. It doesn't come from flags, countries, or power. It comes from your own, yes, to yourself. From that one moment when you look in the mirror and see no pretense, only a human being, slowly being reborn, stronger, whole, untouchable. You may be thinking, that sounds beautiful, but can I really do it? The answer is, you don't need to be perfect to begin. You just need to be honest about where you are. Each small step, each brave, no, each time you choose truth over comfort, is the first breath of a free spirit returning. If you're still here, that means you've already started saying goodbye to the old version of yourself. And if your heart is trembling with something newly awakened, click like to affirm that you are ready and subscribe to the channel. Because the next part is the final integration where this entire journey brings you to a new beginning. A self no longer shaped by shame, but guided by freedom and presence. You don't have to live one more day wearing a mask that isn't yours. You don't owe anyone a perfect version of yourself. No one has the right to ask you to be easier, less emotional, or more normal just to make them feel comfortable. Every voice you've ever heard in your head, telling you that you're wrong, that you're worthless, that you're too much, those voices are not yours. They are the echoes of a system built to make you doubt yourself. A system that feeds on shame, runs on obedience, and survives only because you're too afraid to leave the role they gave you. But now things are different. Now you know. Shame is not just a feeling. It is a tool, and you can put it down whenever you are ready. Nietzsche didn't want you to rebel just to destroy. He wanted you to destroy in order to create. Bradshaw didn't just help you heal. He helped you return. and fully be who you are. You are no longer a product of the past. You are the creator of the present, the author of your future. Freedom doesn't begin with shouting, "I'm not afraid." It begins in silence, in the quiet moment where you look at yourself and say, "I don't have to pretend anymore." From this point forward, you are no longer living to fit in. You are living to become more real, more rooted, more free. You are the only one who gets to define your worth, and you no longer need another reason to lift your head high. If this journey stirred something deep inside you, leave one simple but powerful sentence in the comments: "I release myself from shame." Write it down, name the cage, and start walking out of it. Click like if you can feel the shift beginning, and subscribe right now, because we'll continue walking this path together on the journey back home, to recreate and fully embody the purest form of who you are. You are worthy, not because you're perfect, but because you're alive, truly alive.